And then Black Canary, who's black. Did you get it? Black Canary, and she's black. Did you get it? The casting director, certainly. And so the characters that I see in front of me on the screen that they're giving to me in the trailer are nothing like the characters from the extended universe, from the comic universe. For example, I'll take Cassandra Cain. In this, she's a big-mouthed, and I just saying it how it is, pretty dumpy kid. Whereas in the comics, Cassandra Cain was a mute. She's been trained to an insane level of martial arts by her father and other trainers. She defeated Lady Shiva, one of only a few people who can. As in the DC universe, Lady Shiva is known as the greatest martial artist out there. So to defeat her is saying something huge. And she's a very reserved, quiet character. So suddenly you have this, which you've had for a lot of years. She can speak now, but she's very deliberate in her speech indeed. So you have that, and then you suddenly just go to dumpy Asian girl, loudmouth dumpy Asian girl, who's stealing on the streets. So all it is they're just taking names, and they have no respect for the actual source material. So that kind of annoys me. It does annoy me. Because it's not, I wouldn't say being transformative with the characters. It's just taking the name of a character and doing something. Black Canary, why she had to be race changed, I don't know. I guess that's where we are in today's day and age. If you diversify, it makes it better somehow. Because that's working at the moment, isn't it? It worked with Marvel Comics, and they just lost so many readers to the fact that they actually had to change them back because nobody was buying into their gender swaps or race swaps or whatever. And it's working on television, as we can clearly see right now with things like Dr. Woke and Batwomans and Supergirls and all that kind of stuff. Great ratings for those shows. Wonderful, wonderful ratings for those shows. Some of the lowest that there's been. And then Huntress. Huntress is a very complex character. Huntress has gone through many iterations. And this... I've got rage issues! Because loud equals funny, remember, folks? Loud equals funny. That's where we are. So it just doesn't fit the Helena Bertinelli again. Now, that doesn't mean that they have to be absolutely spot on with the source material, but from what I see in the trailers, it doesn't seem to be any sort of improvement. It seems to just be a cluster fudge of stuff, of mess. And I kind of expect that the film is just going to be a mess. But I want to go through, because I know I'm waffling on a bit, because this is kind of like... when I say important to me, it's just a thing. It's just so... It's so weird and disheartening that when you've been involved in a fandom for so long, and a lot of you will be able to relate to this, whether or not I'm talking about comics, DC, Doctor Who, Star Wars, whatever, just relate it to a fandom you're in, and it's just getting irked away by these fucking idiots, that are doing things in trying to preach here, it's Black Mask is the misogynist, doesn't like the women's, and it's about the toxic masculinities. It's just like, who the fuck are you to preach to me? Who the fuck are you? Christina Hodgson, look at you. Young woman. Look at your credits. You've done nothing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 credits to your name. You couldn't be any more privileged if you tried. Started with Shut In, Unforgettable, you grabbed Bumblebee, and now look. You got Birds of Prey, you got the Flash upcoming, and Batgirl upcoming. You live in the most privileged of times that you can have nothing of substance behind you and suddenly land some big budget movies. Bang, immediately. Sure, that's down to your talent. I'm sure it is. It's got nothing to do with the day and age that we live in. that things have just got to get givens over immediately and all that kind of stuff. No, you earned it. Well done. So who are these people to, like, preach to you? Who are
Gamer.
to talk to me about misogyny?
Bye-bye.
Look at this. Look at this. Birds of Prey writer Christina Hodson explains how her everyday experiences with misogyny make it easy for her to write Black Mask. Oh, boo-hoo. It's held you back. Held you back some, hasn't it? It's just like, who are these people? Who are these people that they think they have the God-given right to tell me who the fuck I am? How dare you? You don't know me. You don't know anyone out there. You take your own neurosis, and you take your own, I don't know quite the way to phrase this, I suppose, OCD with microaggressions, I guess. And then you just spit it out and tar everyone with the same brush. It just baffles me. And these are the people who are now getting to make the movies. They're now the people who are getting to make the movies. Oh, the flash is going to be a doozy. These are the people who are now writing the comics. And you're trying to say that this is the way to sell? This is the way to talk me into the cinema? This is the way to make me part with money and put a bum on a seat? It's just, to me, it's just crazy. It's just absolutely crazy that this is where we are now. No, I don't know whether or not Birds of Prey is going to be a success or not. I think it might have an okay-ish opening, but I think we'll kind of hear the same things. I've got a feeling we're just going to hear the same things from the same people. We're going to have the media praising it as a revolutionary all-girl ba-da-da, and then we're going to have the court has just gone, oh, this is just trash. And we'll see. But regardless of whether or not it's a hit or a failure, is irrelevant anymore. Because if it's a hit, brilliant. Legitimately brilliant. But if it's a failure, then it's the misogynists and it's the toxic masculinity peeps who stayed away because they were afraid of the whammons. So it's all planned out, and then Christina will get she will fail upwards based on that if the film doesn't do well.
Hello there, beautiful friends. Here's some Buttigieg, Pete Buttigieg, an unwavering beacon of hope with the sincerity and principles we need to lead this country towards the end of this sentence. Hi, please show this video to your parents, who are statistically more likely to support Pete than people younger than his age. 38 recently, happy birthday, Judge Pete. Anyway, statistically, show this to your parents. Hi parents, thanks for watching. I hear you might be checking out this Pete guy as an alternative to like a Joe Biden type. To quote this older gentleman from an article about Pete fans, I like Joe, but I don't want Joe to be president. I think we just need new leadership. I really feel that very strongly. Obama was a new year and transformational, and I think we need that. Now, we've already talked about how Joseph Robinette Biden Jr. is the perfect candidate to primary Donald Trump for the Republican nomination and save the soul of America like he says he wants to do, and bring the Trumpist party back to reality, but also about how he's had his hand in a lot of pretty bad decisions and policies that have brought us to where we are today, and is a part of the political establishment America rejected when they elected Donald Trump, and nobody wants two sundowning old men arguing over who's handsier with women. So maybe his candidacy would actually be a disaster and nobody actually wants it, so please drop out, Joe. Drop out, Joe. But Anyway, Pete, a fresh face, Obama 2.0, Hope 2.0, High Hope. We don't need to do the dance. We don't need to show you this.
You better vote Pete. You better act now. A leader like this only once comes around. Mayor Pete is coming to town.
But we did. Anyway, what were we? Right, a person talking. About how, sure, Joe Biden is a bad candidate for lots of reasons, but how so is Pete for lots of reasons. The Pete appeal among an older demographic seems to stem from this idea that he's like a boomer's ideal version of a millennial. You know, he's such a nice young man. Quite the resume. In a similar way, Bernie Sanders is a millennial's ideal version of a boomer. You know, quite the let's aggressively fix all of the messes we created. It's the difference between being young and being youthful, basically. It's well illustrated in this moment of pure art from a Buttigieg advertisement of Pete speaking out loud for the purposes of recording and releasing an advertisement for people to see.
I believe we should move to make college affordable for everybody. There are some voices saying, well, that doesn't count unless you go even further, unless it's free even for the kids of millionaires. But I only want to make promises that we can keep. Look, what I'm proposing is plenty bold.
Plenty bold. So imagine a younger person who is aware of the overwhelming number and diversity of effects of climate change, of crushing student debt, stagnant wages during increasing productivity, all the wars we do for no reason, a healthcare system dependent on an insurance industry built on profit. So anyway, you're that person, and you know those things. And here's my plan for it, and my plan is, well, it's plenty bold. Now, we'll come back to this ad and how Pete talks, or lies if you prefer, but another really good example of the difference between Joe Biden but younger and young people is this other piece of pure art, a Profiles in Courage Award-winning essay for the John F. Kennedy Presidential Library, lauding Bernie Sanders' boldness and consistency of principle and ability to unite both parties to get things done by an 18-year-old Pete Buttigieg. It's a glowing review that also chides other politicians for drifting to the center and focus testing. It's adorable, and maybe we'll return to it when specific quotes are relevant to what Pete does and says later. But for now, back to you, the parents. Hi, I get it. As a woman in that article explains with a shrug, I am ready to have somebody young. Creepy, but all right. This says it all, really. It's not about his amazing plans or ideas or experience or leadership skills. It's about his aesthetic, this idea of what a president should be. Here's Mandy Moore explaining exactly what I'm talking about.
He's a veteran, he's brilliant, he's a Rhodes Scholar, he speaks 7 languages, he's compassionate, he's authentic, he's a real human. I don't know, I feel like that's a quality that's often overlooked in a presidential candidate.
He's such a nice, smart young man. He seems like a president, I guess. Or at least he's got the resume of a president. He seems to have always wanted to be one. In his John F. Kennedy Presidential Library essay about how cool Bernie Sanders is, he ends it by saying, I commend Bernie Sanders for giving me an answer to those who say American young people see politics as a cesspool of corruption, beyond redemption. I have heard that no sensible young person today would want to give his or her life to public service. I can personally assure you, this is untrue. Considering he's currently running to be the youngest president ever, I don't think it's unfair to characterize this as an ambitious young man who probably already wanted to be like a president someday. Give his life to politics and public service. So the nice young president boy began to build that resume. He went to Harvard and graduated magna deafening jizz. He worked on some campaigns, learned a language or two. Right out of college, he worked for the Cohen Group, a strategic consulting firm founded in 2001 by former United States Secretary of Defense William S. Cohen. He helped a few more campaigns, another degree at Oxford thanks to a Rhodes Scholarship, Mr. President, a couple more languages, and then he ended up at McKinsey & Company in 2007, where I'm going to editorialize a bit here. He learned how to lie. McKinsey & Company is a multi-billion-dollar management consulting firm formed in 1926. According to a 2004 article in The Independent by Ben Chu, McKinsey's fingerprints can be found at the scene of some of the most spectacular corporate and financial debacles of recent decades. Enron comes to mind before Pete worked there, and ICE comes to mind after Pete worked there. They've assisted Saudi Arabia in cracking down on dissidents. They do all kinds of stuff that's all in service of the public. Sorry, profit. And the bottom line. Reuters describes these incidents and other practices as indicating not bad apples, but a culture of corruption. Now, according to the Washington Post, a review of speeches and interviews that Buttigieg gave when he first pursued public office in Indiana shows that he consistently played up his McKinsey experience, touting work advising senior decision makers and claiming he was part of billion-dollar decisions made by Fortune 500 companies. But by the time his presidential campaign began, you wouldn't even know he ever worked there for more than 3 years. However, after continued pressure by people who were like, "But you want to be the president. What did you do while you were at that bad company?" he has released some details and former clients. Pete, always the humble one in the room of 38-year-olds trying to be president of the United States of America, downplays his work, saying, "To the extent that I was uniquely qualified on something, it was definitely Canadian grocery prices." Speaking of Canadian grocery prices, the company Buttigieg is referring to is Loblaw, a Canadian grocer implicated in a price-fixing scandal to coordinate with competitors and artificially raise the price of bread. This was brought up recently by the New York Times editorial board.
You've been on the front lines of corporate downsizing. You've been on the front lines of corporate price fixing. You've been on the front lines of our misadventures.
I'm sorry, that's...
Of our
I mean, what? First of all, you gotta get better at pretending to be indignant there, buddy. Also, can we quickly imagine Pete going up against Donald Trump?
On the front lines of our misadventures.
I'm sorry, that's...
Do we have a clip of our imagination?
That's what it...
Cool. Anyway, after catching himself downplaying the scandal and correcting himself because he knows the board wouldn't let it fly.
So the proposition that I've been on the front lines of corporate price fixing, just to get that out of the way.
You worked for a company that was fixing bread prices.
No. I worked for a consulting company that had a client that may have been involved in fixing, or what was apparently in a scandal. I was not aware of the Canadian bread pricing scandal until last night.
He doesn't address the downsizing that was mentioned, or the general issue of what McKinsey does, as opposed to his involvement in one specific scandal. He goes on to talk about how he understands problems with American capitalism and how just because he doesn't seem emotive at times, he would not be doing any of this if he weren't propelled by passion, or Bernie Sanders or whatever. Speaking of things Pete's written, I'm just going to read you a passage from Pete's memoir. You're like 37. Anyway, here's a guy who sees the problems in American capitalism generally, writing about the price of food. I was learning about the nature of data. By manipulating millions of data points, I could weave stories about possible futures and gather insights on which ideas were good or bad. I could simulate millions of shoppers going up and down the aisles of thousands of stores, and in my mind, I pictured their habits shifting as a well-placed price cut subtly changed their perceptions of our clients as a better place to shop. Now, to be fair, he did say price cuts, so that says nothing about coordinating with competitors to artificially raise the price of bread. But to be balanced, that Reuters article about the culture of corruption in McKinsey, published a year after Pete left McKinsey, explains the reason you hire McKinsey is that its consultants have seen strategic business issues like yours before, and therefore might have developed good insights into how to approach them. But the reason they're familiar with those issues is that they've been given highly confidential information about your competitors. So when you hire McKinsey, you're essentially trying to acquire, for a very high hourly fee, the kind of corporate intelligence that can only be built up through long exposure to highly sensitive commercial information. Now, it's unclear what Pete's actual role was with the bread pricing, or if McKinsey was even involved in that particular scandal, unlike the other scandals in which McKinsey was involved. But whether or not his work led to the price fixing, McKinsey the company is maybe one of those problems with American capitalism that Pete's so aware of, but he never addresses that. It's not about specifically what Pete did while working there, but that he worked there. Because like I said, he believably denies being involved in the price fixing.
The front lines of our misadventures.
I'm sorry,
of our misadventures.
And it doesn't address the downsizing, which we'll get to. He downplays his role and distances himself from all its corporate scandals, despite it being the corporate scandal company. All that he's really said is, quote, "I think they've made a lot of poor choices, especially in the last few years. I left about 10 years ago, but it's really frustrating as somebody who worked there to see some of the decisions they've made." And that's straight up McKinsey talk. Obfuscating the point, selling you something. Their poor choices, which don't reflect who they are or what they do in the last few years, you see. Enron was 2018, you see. To get a little more McKinsey talk, when asked about their work with ICE, McKinsey's managing director, Kevin Smeater, sent out a memo explaining that McKinsey was not working with ICE to implement its border activities, but simply providing, quote, management consulting services for the agency's Enforcement and Removal Operations Division. He also wrote that the company will not, under any circumstances, engage in any work anywhere in the world that advances or assists policies that are at odds with our values. So good. You weren't helping ICE implement its border activities, but just helping the Enforcement and Removal Operations Division. We're not helping ICE. That would be at odds with our values. We're merely helping ICE. McKinsey is just another language Pete learned to lie to you with, to sell you something worse than what would be good. You can hear this in Look No Further, that plenty bold-a-jedge clip. My plan is plenty bold. It's bold enough, okay? Just like, come on, guys. It's almost like I'm giving you too much, you know? You've had plenty, so take it. In fact, in regards to joining the rest of the world and providing health care for everyone in the richest nation on earth,
I think there's got to be some humility in our policy here.
be humble, says the guy who wants to be the president. We need humility in regards to being humiliated by the rest of the world on this issue. Stop asking for something bolder than plenty. You don't deserve My plan is bold enough. Take the scraps. Pete talks like this whenever he wants to make it clear that in order to achieve Medicare for all, which he totally wants to do, always has and totally still does, and thinks it's the best option that we should do, and in order to do it, we have to not do it yet. I mean, sure.
Think about what the president can do to unify a new American majority for some of the boldest things we've attempted in my lifetime. We have an opportunity to do the biggest things we've done in my lifetime.
But what if, in this bold time for America, we pump the brakes a bit, man? I mean, we already tried universal health care in the 90s. We should do a public option and hope that people like it, and maybe then we can start to think about doing the single payer part. And I'm actually not here to argue policy, but I will just say that the whole point of universal programs is that everyone gets them. And when people like Pete, who take a lot of money from insurance and pharmaceuticals, frame Medicare for all as taking away people's choice, as if employee-dependent insurance in certain networks and bronze, silver, or gold variants on deductibles is it's a choice of freedom that people love it. When they frame it about choice, they're playing the private insurance game, laid out plainly here by a former Sitka employee who got tired of doing the wrong thing. Also, offering a public option is actually setting yourself up to fail, Pete, as this former director of Medicare points out very succinctly.
I'm a little worried about the public option for a kind of technical reason. Insurance companies want to provide insurance to people that don't need it. That's how they make money. And so anything that can be done to game risk so that...
Public option would be used by all the people who really need the insurance
and
the
if
most.
I were insurance companies would then try to find ways to have people who really need care go to the public option, which would enrich. It'd be a good business case for them, and that's not good for the country.
But again, not here for policy. I'm just here for that sweet, sweet McKinsey nonsense.
Look, I think it could very well be the long-run destination, but I think there's got to be some humility in our policy.
Good day.
Let's put this out there and see if it's really the best plan for everybody. I think it will be the best plan, but I'm not willing to assume.
Hell yeah. In fact, That Plenty Bolded-Edge clip, it's about how free college and trade school is bad because we don't want to pay for the children of millionaires to go to college. Now, aside from the fact that, again, universal programs are about everyone paying in and everyone having the option, and also children of millionaires aren't like all clamoring to go to Ohio State, and also for harping so much on the pay for the kids of millionaires thing, Pete's actual policy on his website, he wants people to read, says, "We can make public tuition completely free for over 7 million lower and middle income students who are eligible for federal Pell Grants, including many middle income families with multiple children in college, and for all families earning up to $100,000. I mean, a family earning up to 100K, that's like 2 salaries, like 2 teachers? Certainly not actually close to millionaires, the thing he's worried about. So if one of the teachers gets a raise, that's going to be a gnaw on the college for their kid, or it's just a weirdly, clearly dishonest way of Pete to frame this is all. Like that seems like a blatant lie is all. Speaking of blatant lies, Pete also worked for Blue Cross Blue Shield and was recently asked by Rachel Maddow if his work there had anything to do with layoffs at the company that took place a couple years later. Buttigieg said, "I doubt it," adding,
I don't know what happened in the time after I left. That was in 2007 when they decided to shrink in 2009. Now, what I do know is that there are some voices in the Democratic primary right now who are calling for a policy that would eliminate the job of every single American working at every single insurance company in the country.
First of all, big difference, Pete, between eliminating jobs so that an insurance company can make money and eliminating jobs so that everyone can go to the doctor. Popping on your McKinsey accent there, Pete. But part B of all, here's Pete 4 years after the time he left and 2 years after they decided to shrink. In 2011, on camera, into a microphone so people can hear him speak.
So I remember one client overseas, it was a large insurance firm, they were doing in such a way that they regularly did something that they didn't know what people were.
Could mean anything, just a weird emerging pattern of seemingly blatant lies. These are just 2 examples of his work at McKinsey. I could mention his team's suggestions to privatize the post office, the only government agency almost all Americans f***ing love, but whatever. Pete had a gross job where he learned how to talk gross, all right? As a Rhodes Scholar, we've all had to choose between corporate consulting and no other option. But it wasn't all business and corporate intelligence. Pete had time to party too. Like in 2008, when he went on vacation to visit his friend in Ethiopia and they decided to take like 10 hours to go to Somaliland for 24 hours, then spent their time there talking to local officials, and then wrote an article in the New York Times promoting America's involvement in Somaliland. All right, let me back up and start our new segment, the Central Intelligence Buttigiegency. So there's a theory out there that Pete is some sort of CIA asset, or like involved with the CIA, or at the very least, weirdly favored by the intelligence community. There's a lot of space between those options, but there are just a few odd things. And no, it's not just his working at a strategic consulting firm founded by former United States Secretary of Defense William S. Cohen, then one of the world's largest corporate intelligence firms while training to be a naval intelligence officer. Then shortly after beginning his term as mayor of South Bend, the Navy Reserves called him up to send him to Afghanistan for 7 months in the year we were withdrawing from Afghanistan. And he's also on the board of advisors for the Truman National Security Project, but never talks about that stuff. And this truly weird trip to Somaliland as a vacation for 24 hours. Now, his campaign says he was just, starting at McKinsey and visiting his friend in Ethiopia, and they decided to stop by Somaliland, as one does, for a single day. The friend he was visiting is Nat Myers, the best man at Pete's wedding. Nat is currently at the Office of Transition Initiative, part of the United States Agency for International Development Bureau for Democracy, Conflict, and Humanitarian Assistance, and was developed to, quote, provide fast, flexible, short-term assistance to take advantage of windows of opportunity to build democracy and peace. Interesting phrasing, advantage of windows of opportunity to build democracy. William Bloom describes the USAID as having a close working relationship with the CIA, and agency officers often operated abroad under USAID cover. Foreign Policy and the Associated Press has documented the USAID's history of working with the CIA and their own intelligence operations, According to an AP investigation, in 2010, the USAID launched a social media platform of 40,000 users designed to foment unrest and spark a revolution and the collapse of the communist government of Cuba. This didn't work, of course, though it did allow Havana to gather intelligence on the 40,000 people who used it. Anyway, Normal Pete and his normal friend at the USAID, when they were 25, went to Somaliland for a day and talked to local officials and then left and wrote an article for the New York Times about how America should get more involved in Somaliland to help build democracy through opportunity and stuff. Like, I'm sure Pete's not in the CIA. It's just weird, all right? Like, I can't have a little conspiracy fun. It's got to be all bores with you people, but it's not that he's in the CIA. It's just that he has a lot of experience manipulating data and using language and private intelligence to manipulate people, right? It's why he talks the way he does. But whatever, we're moving on. All right, Pete left McKinsey in 2010. He ran for state treasurer and lost. On the campaign trail, while he was going on about all the Fortune 500 companies he helped make money and fire people, he also argued that accepting contributions from banks, political action committees linked to banks, or bank executives would amount to a conflict of interest, and he swore off, or in the latter case, limited such donations to far below the legal limit. Pete seems to have changed his mind about money in politics, though. At a recent event, he was asked by Greg Chung, a student organizer at Iowa Student Action, "I wanted to ask if you think that taking big money out of politics includes not taking money off of billionaires and closed-door fundraisers." To which Pete replied, "No," and walked away. This is probably because although Pete has sworn off corporate PAC money and pledged to refuse money from executives at fossil fuel companies, The Intercept reports a review of his campaign disclosure records finds that Buttigieg's presidential campaign is awash in cash from bank executives, many of them heavily involved in financing the fossil fuel industry. But no influence. Speaking of influence, it was recently reported by Axios that one of Pete's bundlers, H.K. Park, dangled influence to donors in an email reading, "If you want to get on the campaign's radar now, before he is flooded with donations after winning Iowa and New Hampshire, you can use the link below for donations." Now, the campaign's response was, "The campaign did not see or authorize the language in this email," fair enough, "but it is ridiculous to interpret it as anything more than asking potential supporters who may be interested in Pete to join our campaign before caucusing and voting begins." Get on the campaign's radar now.
Servant
It's another
of
way of saying
humor.
donate to the
Fuck
campaign.
yes.
See? H.K. Park previously served as the special assistant to the Defense Department's chief of staff and currently works for the Cohen Group, Pete's old work. Anyway, speaking of simply replying no and walking away, the day before he said taking big money out of politics doesn't include not taking money from billionaires and closed-door fundraisers. After being asked by a student organizer, he was asked at a press conference about his closed-door private fundraisers, something he's been asked about for months, and
Level 80?
Again, I don't have a timeline for you. What's it? Yes. What's it? There are a lot of considerations, and I'm thinking about it. No.
Shit.
Now, Pete wasn't always not so transparent about these closed-door private fundraisers. It seems to have really started after an issue with
They're all level 80.
As reported in October by the New York Times, Pete
Damn it.
Buttigieg's presidential campaign, facing criticism, distanced itself on Friday from a Chicago lawyer who tried to block the release of footage of the 2014 police shooting of a black teenager, LaQuan McDonald. The lawyer, Steve Patton, gave $5,600, the legal maximum contribution, to Mr. Buttigieg in June and was scheduled to host a fundraiser for him on Friday. After the Associated Press reported on Mr. Patton's involvement, Mr. Buttigieg's campaign said that it would return the money and that Mr. Patton would not attend the fundraiser. Then, those pesky closed-door fundraisers started in full swing. Though, to be fair to Pete, his campaign has since opened doors to fundraisers, per campaign manager Mike Schmuel. In a continued commitment to transparency, we are announcing today that our campaign will open fundraisers to reporters and will release the names of people raising money for our campaign. Speaking of transparency and releasing the names of people raising money for a campaign, in mid-December, the Buttigieg campaign released a list of his bundlers, the private fundraisers who collect other donors for the candidate, having maxed out their own donations at $5,600 per cycle. The transparent list from the Buttigieg campaign weirdly excluded a bunch of those private fundraisers, like some finance guys, some former ambassadors, investors. One of the bundlers seemingly purposefully omitted from Mayor Pete's public disclosure is H. Rajan Cohen, not of the Cohen Group, but a lawyer and current senior chairman at Sullivan and Cromwell. During the 2008 financial crisis, he represented Bear Stearns, Lehman Brothers, Fannie Mae, AIG, Wachovia, National City, JP Morgan, and 3 other banks I didn't recognize. Anyway, the unfairly maligned Wall Street Pete's private fundraiser that he made sure wasn't on his transparent list of private fundraisers had this to say about the financial crisis. I am far from convinced there was something inherently wrong with the system. Now, obviously, a candidate's donors and supporters don't equal the candidate, but it is maybe a bit curious that a defender of so many of the financial sector's crimes and capitalism's flaws is working so hard to raise money for this consulting firm guy who claims to be plenty passionate about the problem facing millennials and younger people, while claiming to see the flaws in American capitalism, but not wanting you to know that that guy is helping him. But also, hey, you know, we need all the money we can get, all right? As Pete said back in October, we are going up against the sitting president of the United States. He has tremendous amounts of support and allies at his back, and we're not going to beat him with pocket change. The pocket change he's referring to is the record amount of money from the record amount of donors raised by Bernie Sanders, his hero. Pete doesn't like when people criticize him for taking money from billionaires and bankers and so on, assuming it would contribute to like a conflict of interest or something. At a recent debate, everyone was like, "You've got all these billionaires donating to you, Pete. Look at all the grotesquely wealthy people supporting your campaign. Why that? Why the closed-door wine cave fundraisers? How come?" And they compared his high donors to their own low average donor number, and so on. Well, on Christmas Eve, Pete's campaign sent out this email about a contest to see who can donate the least amount to the campaign. Just like a fun little game to donate the least amount. Anything to get that donor average deceptively down, huh, Pete? And I don't know, Pete just seems like kind of a major liar who cares more about being president than being president. I don't want to just call him a liar, but I don't know, man.
Hello? This is him.
is talking about the Founding Fathers' view on slavery.
They were wise enough to realize that they didn't have all the answers and that some things would change. A good example of this is something like slavery or civil rights. It's an embarrassing thing to admit, but the people who wrote the Constitution did not understand that slavery was a bad thing and did not respect civil rights. And yet they created a framework so that as the generations came to understand that that was important, they could write that into the Constitution too.
And like, that ain't true. Here are all these quotes about how they knew slavery was bad. And Pete's a history major. So like, probably lying, right? Weirdly ignoring the Founding Fathers knowing something was bad, but doing it anyway for profit and moneyed interests. Pete, something to think about? Which I guess brings us to this.
You running for president and you want black people to vote for you? That's a downfall. That's not gonna happen.
I'm not asking for your vote.
Now, according to this recent piece from the ground in Iowa, Pete fans are baffled that black people don't support him. Quote, he wouldn't project that black lives don't matter. To him, all lives matter. Eat again. Now, there are a lot of factors that go into this, and despite the Pete campaign leaking a memo to the press about a focus group that could indicate older black voters don't like that he's gay, citation needed, it's probably more to do with how he's handled issues of race during his time as mayor and also after, including his handling of the shooting of Eric Logan by a South Bend officer, and just his relationship with the police in general, which we'll get to soon. At one rally, a protester asked, "What matters about a black life to you?" To which Buttigieg replied, "The same thing that matters to me about my own." I guess I see what he's trying to say. It just feels a little all lives mattery, you know, like that person from Iowa said, and like that time in 2015 when Pete was talking about police shootings and he said all lives matter. Although later, he did acknowledge this statement that seems very anodyne and something that nobody could be against actually wound up being used to devalue what the Black Lives Matter movement was telling us. That is the contribution of Black Lives Matter, and it's a reason, since learning about how that phrase was being used to push back on that activism, I've stopped using it in that context. So he will stop using that phrase in the context to push back on activism, which is apparently the context he's aware he used it in. So I guess he'll find a different, perhaps more Mackenzian way to push back on that activism later. But at least Pete has released the Douglas Plan, his plan for Black America. His campaign sent it out with hundreds of endorsements, including very specific names cited as endorsements of the plan by black community leaders who, as it turns out, did not endorse the plan and actually had issues with it that weren't addressed, but their names were broadcast anyway. One was adamant about being a Bernie Sanders supporter, so something in common with Pete, and they all pointed out how very clear they were in their correspondence that they did not support, agree with, or like, let alone endorse, Pete's plan. In response to this controversy that nobody seems to bring up to him, like it seems like something he should maybe be asked about in a debate setting, but isn't for some reason, but anyway, his campaign responded to this by pointing out that, well, everyone included on the list was sent an email in which they could opt out of being on the endorsement list. Gonna read a little bit from that email. Good afternoon. Thank you for your willingness to publicly support Mayor Pete Buttigieg's Douglas Plan, the boldest plan. Then it goes into a little bit about the plan. And then it says, if you do not want your name included, please let us know by 4 p.m. Eastern Time today. See, that's the power of choice right there. Getting an email to opt out between afternoon and 4 p.m. Literally, his campaign sounds like if an insurance company came inside a cable company. But perhaps Pete's biggest blunder, Jedge, involves the firing of South Bend's black police chief, Daryl Boykins, who the FBI was investigating for recording police officers in order to root out corruption and racism. Pete and his former and current campaign manager, Mike Schmuhl, cite the FBI investigation as the reason for the firing, saying that they were told that the only way to avoid an indictment was if Boykins resigned. Although depositions from 2013 show Schmuhl making it clear that the FBI made no indication that there would be indictments if Boykins was not let go. They merely wanted the department to adjust their policy. And I guess firing the black police chief and replacing him with 2 white guys is a way to do that. Or a way to say,
I'm not asking for your vote.
further deposition from police employee Karen DePate, also fired by Buttigieg, describes racist remarks and a plot by white officers to use Pete's donors to get him to fire Boykins. The thing Pete eventually did. Not many people have heard the recordings, and there's no way to know why Pete ultimately fired Boykins. Although we do know that the reason he gave wasn't true. Very uncharacteristic of former Mayor Pete. I say former because that's what he is now, and I think we owe it to him to never call him Mayor Pete again, but rather former Mayor Pete. But to the point, the last day of 2019 was Pete's last day as mayor. He handed out keys to the city. One of those recipients was Bob Urbanski, a big player in South Bend, and a huge donor to Buttigieg's campaign. Urbanski is the donor named, by name, in the tapes as the donor that would be used to get Buttigieg to fire Boykins. And according to Jonathan Larson's reporting at the Young Turks, in 2018, Urbanski backed a campaign loan for the cop who wanted Boykins out. The 2 other backers of the loan were Buttigieg's lawyer who oversaw the chief's ouster and the lawyer still fighting the release of the tapes. Probably nothing. Probably not yet another example that sort of exemplifies Pete's relationship with money, power, politics, people, and lying. So I guess parents, right? I'm talking to parents. Pete's full of shit. Young people don't like him because they don't trust him, because he represents everything wrong with politics and quite a lot of the problems that put young people in the situations they're in today. He's an empty vessel, shifting in the wind depending on where the money is coming from and depending on what his focus groups tell him, abandoning any principles he may have had as he drifts towards the center. I wish there was an essay by a young person about how maybe that's not good. Oh well. He seems to just say whatever he needs to say to win. And that might sound a bit extreme, but I feel like I've given quite a lot of examples of this. Also, a New York Times piece about Pete running for DNC chair back in 2017 quotes Jimmu Green describing an incident where he kept bringing up his attendance at the Women's March as this weird, like, performative feet on the ground aesthetic, when during the march, the other candidates were at a retreat discussing fundraising to keep the DNC alive. After a forum in Houston, Jimmu Green confronted him about it, and to quote her, he looked me in the eye and said, "This is a competition. You say whatever you need to say to win." That's when I saw who the real Mayor Pete was. Sorry, should change that to former Mayor Pete now. Anyway, thanks for watching, parents. If you've gotten anything from this, I hope it's that Joe Biden and Pete Buttigieg are bad candidates who will lose and wouldn't do much anyway. If you get anything else from this, I hope it's that former Mayor Pete should be true to himself, drop out and endorse Bernie Sanders. I know you had high hopes, but unfortunately, they're not plenty high hopes. Anyway, play us out, former Mayor Pete. I'm a Pete Buttigieg now. I'm all in for Pete.
Gonna look to you to spread that sense of hope to those that you know. Come on.
Hey everybody's parents, thanks for watching and changing your mind and voting differently now. Anyway, please like and subscribe our channel and leave a nice comment. Check out our patreon.com/somemorenews and our podcast Even More News. And check out a different candidate. Check out that John Kerry guy. He's got a lot.
I would like to talk to you about an exciting opportunity. I just need 30 minutes of your time to explain it, but it has the potential to transform your life. I'm talking about multi-level marketing companies, or MLMs. Companies like Mary Kay, Rodan & Fields, Nu Skin, Amway, and Herbalife. They sell different products, but generally MLMs have two main things in common. First, you don't see them on store shelves. You buy them through distributors like friends, family and co-workers. And secondly, those distributors are always looking for more people to join them. And they have a pretty attractive message.
Why Herbalife? Because you get to be your own boss, earn extra money,
work from home, raise your own children.
you can name your own hours,
Make part-time or full-time money.
paying the bills.
Share this video with 10 people.
That you care about, that you love, that you adore, that you admire. 20 people, 30 people.
Come on, what are you waiting for?
100 people. Share with everybody. They want
My
what
mom
we
is
have. We got it.
Okay, hold on. I'm supposed to share that with 10 people I love, adore, and admire. That's a tough ask. Let's see. There are the judges on this season of Project Runway. That's 3. Oh, there's Tim Gunn. That's obviously 4. If you count Tim Gunn twice, that's 5. But I'm still 5 short, and I am out now. And before you brush this industry off, you should know, collectively, it did around $36 billion in retail sales last year in the US. You probably know someone who is considering joining an MLM, or who already has and is posting about it 10 times a day on Facebook or Instagram. And if you do know someone like that, or have considered signing up yourself, this story is important. Because let me explain how the system is supposed to work. Generally, distributors have 2 main ways to make money. Sell the product itself, whether it's makeup, vitamins, or health shakes, and earn money on those sales, and this is key, recruit other people into the company and get money based on their sales and the sales of people they recruit in turn. Just look at Vima. A few years ago, a hidden camera caught a then distributor for that company, walking a prospective recruit through just how easy it can be.
Let's say you sign up 3 friends. Okay. So then you and I would help those 3 friends sign up their 3 friends and get their $700. Okay. Now there's 9 people there, right? Then we help those 9 people sign up their 3 friends and they get 7. So everyone kind of gets their money back.
Wait, you kind of get your money back? That's as reassuring as hearing a doctor say he kind of knows where your appendix is. Oh, it's probably somewhere near the spleen. And if you are thinking, well, hold on, that business structure sounds familiar, isn't that a pyramid scheme? Well, there was a journalist waiting outside to ask the exact same question.
It's not an illegal pyramid scheme, it's a direct selling network marketing company.
Is it shaped like a pyramid, the business structure?
It is shaped like a pyramid, yes.
But you're saying it's not an illegal pyramid
It's
scheme?
not an illegal pyramid scheme.
Oh, I get it. So it's not a pyramid, it's just pyramid shaped. You know, like a Dorito, or an angry bird, or just a pile of bullshit. But let's put that pyramid question aside for a moment, because from the outside, these companies do have the trappings of legitimacy. Many have high-profile celebrity endorsers. Vima had noted science expert Jenny McCarthy. Advocare has esteemed ball thrower Drew Brees, and an MLM called Max International had this guy.
After more than a year of due diligence, Gina and I joined Max International as home-based distributors and media spokespersons.
Oh, to be a fly on the wall while Gina and Chuck were poring over the numbers during that year-long due diligence session. Gina with an adding machine, Chuck randomly kicking stuff. It'd be like watching Lennon and McCartney write Sgt. Pepper. Still, for many MLMs, the biggest celebrity is their founder, who can enjoy cult-like status. Just look at J.R. Ridinger, CEO of Market America. At company conferences, the guy makes quite an entrance. Okay, 4th string wedding chapel Elvis, calm the f*** down. And that's just his walk-on. Once he gets going, he puts on a real show, demonstrating how you can pump money, dramatising the rat race by sweatily running around in a giant wheel, and screaming at the gravestone of Joe Nobody, who never fulfilled his true potential.
Joe, come on, man. The dreams you told me about, we can actually do them now. We don't have to wait, man. It works, and I'm doing it, and I want to help you do it because it's so good. Joe, this is amazing. We can have vacations and sailboats, and we can have multiple homes, and you can give your wife the jewelry that she deserves, man. You're going to be a hero. Come on, Joe, let's do it. Get up, Joe, get up. Before it's too late, get up.
Holy shit! All I can say is, thank goodness funerals don't have a speak now or forever hold your peace section. Because he would be at every cemetery delivering motivational speeches. She lived a good life. F you, your grandmother died a loser. Come back to life, Ethel. You can still have that yacht. Come back to life. And the dangling of vast lifestyle improvements is at the heart of the MLM pitch. Their materials feature flashy cars and luxury travel that you can achieve. And just watch a distributor from Youngevity walk you through a future dream scenario in exquisite detail.
In 2 years, this is what's going to happen to you. You're gonna drive to your work. You're gonna walk into your boss's office. You're gonna sit down, and you're gonna quit your job. You're gonna explain that little pyramid scheme thing that you almost got terminated for last year. You're now an entrepreneur, and you're gonna be doing that full time.
Whoa, 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 back up. Did you just say pyramid scheme and then almost got terminated?
And then you're going to go out to the parking lot, you're going to get into your silver Mercedes that Youngevity has paid for, and you're going to drive home. Oh, no, wait, actually, first you're going to drive to the bank.
I'm sorry, I hate to dwell on this, but you definitely said pyramid scheme back then. But I'm sorry, now we're suddenly going to the bank.
And you're going to walk into the bank, and you're going to deposit your coding bonus. And the lady's going to say, will that be checking or savings? And you're going to say, yeah, I don't really care. I get these all the time.
And then the lady's going to say, that's fantastic, but I actually need to know which account this goes into. And you're going to say, makes no difference to me. And she's going to say, but I can't deposit this unless you specify which account it's policy. And you're going to say, it's all gravy. And she's going to say, how about checking? And you're going to say, I'm loving it. And she's going to say, do I need to get security? And you're going to say, the account ending in 8424, please. Now, Youngevity told us that woman's claims are not authorised by the company and are against Youngevity policy, which forbids income claims. Although, that video was taken at one of their official events, and the woman, Denise Chenault, is featured with her husband on the company website with the words, Denise and Tom Chenault are Youngevity. And come on, you don't let someone embody your company if you don't agree with them. If Flo turned out to run a dogfighting ring, Progressive would wipe her off their website immediately, and by the way, you know that's coming, you can see it in her eyes. There are dead dogs dancing in there. But you cannot deny the picture that she paints is enticing. Who doesn't want to tell their boss to go f*** themselves? Half my staff would do it right now if they could. But MLMs hold out the hope that if you work hard, you can take control of your life, start your own business, and help your family. But how real is the opportunity? Well, let's take a look at just one of these companies in depth, Herbalife. You saw its pitch earlier. It was the one that you were supposed to send to 10, 20, 100 people. It sells nutritional supplements like shakes and vitamins, and it's one of the biggest MLMs around, with net sales of $4.5 billion last year. It has celebrities who talk up its benefits, from superstar athletes like Cristiano Ronaldo to pretty much the last person you're expecting to see in this piece.
Well, first of all, you have a great product. That makes all the difference.
So we got to tell everybody you're a product of the product.
Well, I am a product of the product. It has every combination of things that I like. It's a very good product, delivered by really good people.
Yes, that is Madeleine Albright talking to Herbalife CEO, claiming she's a product of the product. So forget studying at Columbia and Johns Hopkins. If you want to be like the first female Secretary of State, just chug a couple of vanilla-adjacent Nutri-Shakes a day and thank her in the morning. Oh, and about those products. In its early days, Herbalife was accused of overstating their health benefits, claiming in the 80s that one product helped relieve everything from venereal disease to tumours to bedwetting. And back then, their founder, Mark Hughes, was asked by a Senate subcommittee to answer experts who called his diet products into question. And this was his response.
I think if they're so expert in weight loss, why were they so fat yesterday? It seems to me, and I'm not trying to make any jokes, but I do think that they ought to use our product
First, he seems great. But second, why would anyone in the 80s take Herbalife to lose weight? They had cocaine. Come to think of it, we also have cocaine. The point is, cocaine is an effective weight loss option. It's not where I thought I was going with this, but it is where we have ended up. Now, to be fair, that was 30 years ago, and a lot has changed at the company since then. Although, when ABC News filmed some Herbalife distributors just 2 years ago, they found some claims that seem to echo the company's past.
This Herbalife distributor in New York City told us the story of a woman who overcame an inoperable brain tumor thanks to Herbalife.
Whatever it is, what the product did, it helped her a lot.
New recruits were told Herbalife products help to treat heart disease.
24 years ago, I had early congestive heart failure. Nothing worked.
It even helped one woman get pregnant.
I'm 40 years old, got my first pregnant.
Well, that is obviously bullshit. Nutritional shakes cannot help you get pregnant. There are only 3 liquids that can do that. A glass of Merlot, the honey-smooth music of Sade, and good old-fashioned jizz. And people might be making claims like that because they are desperate to move excess product. You see, broadly speaking, under Herbalife's system, distributors can get bonuses and massive discounts on products based on how much they buy, which can be a huge incentive to buy in bulk. For instance, let's say you're selling Herbalife's disgusting creamy chicken soup powder for $13.35 a box. The cheaper you can buy it from Herbalife, the more profit you could make. But to stay qualified for those higher discounts, you have to keep buying product. And it might not be easy to sell that extra soup because A, it's a little pricey, and B, we actually tried it, and it tastes like the wood shavings inside a gerbil cage. And as one former top distributor will tell you, if you are just accumulating product, that can lead to a problem common enough to have a special name.
We'd call it garage qualified. They would stack as much product as they can in their garage, and at some point they would realize that they have to quit.
So people buy product more than they can sell. It sits in a garage. What happens? There's got to be an endpoint here at some point.
When they run out of money, there's an endpoint.
Exactly. So Herbalife may be an industry leader in worthless crap people stick in their garage, along with, of course, the PT Cruiser. The car that looks like a sporty version of a hearse. And as a distributor, it is not easy to figure out exactly how you are going to make money. Just watch this Herbalife video from a few years ago explaining one narrow part of their insanely convoluted compensation plan.
Okay, here we go. Take a look at this example. Now, when E places a 4,000 volume point order at 42%, this counts as personal volume for you. But since this qualifies E to supervisor with a 1-month qualification, that volume now becomes encumbered for everyone in the upline. And remember, each upline distributor needs to accumulate 1,000 unencumbered volume points if they want to qualify for supervisor as well.
It's simple. And if you accumulate 10,000 unencumbered volume points, those are grouped into an unencumbered batch, which qualifies Benedict Cumberbatch for 1 unencumbered cucumber cummerbund. And while yes, that is absolute nonsense, it makes exactly as much sense as everything that came before it. In fact, to hear another former Herbalife distributor tell it, your main focus in the business might be less on products than on the people below you.
You don't make money from selling products. You make a little, not much, not enough to pay the bills that are racking up. You make money from signing people up.
Of course. It's like that famous salesmanship motto from Glengarry Glen Ross. ABSTCOSTOS. Always be selling the concept of selling to other salespeople. And at this point, that pyramid scheme question that we set aside earlier has to be addressed. Because in broad terms, if distributors' earnings come primarily from selling products to actual customers outside of the company, that is probably a legitimate business. But if those earnings come primarily from selling product to the distributors you've recruited below you, and their sales of products to the distributors they've recruited below them, all within the company, that may be a pyramid scheme. And any business that is set up that way has a big problem for a reason that, and I will warn you, does involve math.
almost all of these schemes tell you that you can make money by just recruiting 3 or 4 or 5, let's say, 5. Then you let the 5 do their 5. That gives you 25. What they don't show you is that you could only do that 13 cycles, and you would exceed the population of the Earth.
It's true. Within 14 cycles, you run out of people. And that is assuming that everyone on Earth wants to be a protein shake distributor. And I can think of at least a few people who have better things to do. Alan Alda, for instance, or Malala Yousafzai, or Morton Harkett, lead singer of a-ha. The guy is still swimming in Take On Me money. He doesn't need this shit. And Herbalife CEO, Michael Johnson, has an interesting way of deflecting that whole pyramid scheme question.
I go back to any company. I started in Disney as a director, and I went to be executive vice president and then president of the international entity of the company. So I moved up 6 or 7 levels. And at the top was sitting the CEO of the company, Michael Eisner. Is that a pyramid? Is that any different than what we're doing here?
Yes! It is completely different. Disney was a corporate ladder. Those were all salaried positions with benefits. The company wasn't banking on you personally filling your garage with cases of unsold DVDs of The Lion King 2, Simba's Pride. But Johnson could have made a stronger non-pyramid case in that interview if he could have just shown how much money distributors get from selling product to actual retail customers. But conveniently,
Greetings, thanks, and congratulations to Kenyon's graduating class of 2005. If anybody feels like perspiring, I'd invite you to go ahead because I'm sure going to. In fact, I'm going to. There are these 2 young fish swimming along, and they happen to meet an older fish swimming the other way, who nods at them and says, "Morning, boys, how's the water?" And the 2 young fish swim on for a bit, and then eventually one of them looks over at the other and goes, "What the hell is water?" This is a standard requirement of U.S. commencement speeches, the deployment of didactic little parable-ish stories. The story thing turns out to be one of the better, less bullshitty conventions of the genre. But if you're worried that I plan to present myself here as the wise older fish explaining what water is to you younger fish, please don't be. I am not the wise old fish. The point of the fish story is merely that the most obvious, important realities are often the ones that are hardest to see and talk about. Stated as an English sentence, of course, this is just a banal platitude. But the fact is that in the day-to-day trenches of adult existence, banal platitudes can have a life or death importance.
Well, howdy there, Internet people. It's Bo again. So, guess we got to talk about Joe Rogan, Bernie Sanders. If you don't know,
Das Ganze dauert ein bisschen. Ihr seht es ja, hier wird angepackt und dann nach oben genommen. Hier steht der Ballenwagen noch rum bei Grünne. Das ist alles noch ganz entspannt. Aber
Hey folks, it's Freeman, Battlefield's community manager, here to get you up to speed on what to expect with update 6.0 and the start of our new chapter, Into the Jungle. We're starting this chapter with a brand new map for the Pacific Theatre. This is Solomon Islands. This has been a favourite of mine. In Chapter Rank Rewards this chapter, we're doing things a little differently. Look forward to unlocking Misaki at rank 40. A Japanese commando that you can add to your elites. We'll also have 2 others coming later in the chapter. We'll have more information on that later on. We hope you're looking forward to the start of Chapter 6. Update 6.0 dropped at the start of February. I hope I'll see you on the battlefield.
All right. So does that have armor?
Hello, everybody.
Hello, everybody. We're back.
Sam, what did we do yesterday?
Okay, guys, yesterday we had our day off, okay? We like to have one day off a week. And usually, we don't have to watch anything on Sundays. But we happen to watch a very, very cool presentation at TennoCon about a very, very cool game that someone might have heard of. It's called Destiny 2. Ha! Joking. It's called Warframe. And it's coming up, people. It's getting bigger and bigger. And it's going to be definitely taking on that Destiny 2. Let's talk about that. About Warframe, Destiny Poo, and what to expect very soon.
All right, everybody.
Hello, everyone. We're back.
We just said that.
We just said that again.
Say it again.
Hello, everyone. We're back.
So, yes, look, TennoCon has just taken place. TennoCon is Warframe's annual conference where they announce, you know, their next plans, or their plans for the next sort of 12-month period of that game.
Yeah.
Now, for just a... I'm sure everybody already knows about Warframe, but just for some background context. The game was released in 2013. It was in a pretty sort of bare state, but over a process of, you know, 4 or 5 years, over a period rather, over a period of 4 or 5 years, Digital Extremes, the developer based out in London, Canada, have really turned it around.
It's probably the biggest game I can think of now like with Destiny 2 in terms of that space. Like, it's come from this tiny game to now being one of the biggest MMO looter shooters out there.
Let's go to Steam charts right now. So this,
let's have a look.
This is now 9:40 a.m. in Australia. Warframe is now the 4th most played game on Steam.
Yeah.
Now, I think it normally hovers around 7 Obviously, the TennoCon taking place right now has boosted player numbers. Mind you, that's just the players on Steam.
Yeah.
Warframe also has its own client. When I play Warframe, I just run it off the client, not on Steam. That's not counted in the numbers.
Sure.
So it's a big game. They have just announced a big set of changes, or at least updates.
Yeah.
We'll sort of cover them briefly, but the two main ones to focus on is the inclusion of Fortuna, which is an open world colony on Venus.
Very, very cool.
Now, the Plains of Eidolon expansion that was dropped last year, around September, October, if I remember correctly, focused on the Grineer. And you were on an Earth colony.
Yep.
And that was their first foray into open world spaces.
I was going to say, that was the first time they were dabbling in that, seeing how it was going to go. And obviously, it's been a very, very praised reception. Everyone loved it.
Yep.
And now it's 4 times bigger, this new expansion.
That's right. So this Fortuna sort of space on Venus is 4 times the size of Plains. It also has the inclusion of hoverboards, a new crafting system.
How cool is the hoverboard?
The
When I saw the
hoverboards.
hoverboard, I was like, why isn't Destiny 2 doing hoverboards? Well, they should have. Now they're getting shuttle over.
And then of course you've got Railjack. Now Railjack is their basically space dogfighting kind of mechanic.
Like a Millennium
Oh,
Falcon.
not this shit.
It's basically Warframe does Millennium Falcon.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
So your squad will be up in sort of in low Earth orbit, or low Venus orbit in this case, fighting off waves and waves of Corpus. It's really bold. It's really ambitious.
It really is, and it really, the moment you look at it, you're like, this is one of the most gorgeous games that I've ever seen.
It's beautiful.
And the most, you're right, ambitious in terms of creativity.
Yeah.
The world building component, the small amount that we really saw at TennoCon really gives you so much information of like what to expect, where they're wanting to go with this franchise, what to, in terms of the enemies that you might be fighting and the world itself that you'll be exploring. Like, it's just so much that they gave you.
Yeah. And last but not least, you've got Warframe on Switch. So
Warframe on Switch.
Panic Button, who are the developers that were responsible for the porting of Wolfenstein to the Switch. They ported Doom.
Yep.
And I believe they also ported Rocket League.
Yeah. And
So they're basically a specialized port house.
And Ralph was actually at TennoCon, everybody. Okay, we, the layman, can report that he sat down with Steve Sinclair, and he was actually saying that Steve was playing Doom on Switch.
Yeah.
He was literally saying, I was playing Doom on Switch,
true story.
and I was like, hang on, if they can do this with Doom, we can do this with Warframe. And he literally picked up the phone, was like, guys, let's do this. And that's
he just called them up.
That's literally how Warframe came to Switch, because Doom kind of led the way.
Yeah, we can be sure that this update is big. And let's not forget that Warframe is a free-to-play game.
It's free. And how much does it cost? It's free. And what are you charging? It's free.
Just for a little bit of background, like I've got only about 250 hours on Warframe.
Only.
Trust me, if you play Warframe, 250,
No, I know, but
250 hours
a lot of
is
people,
nothing. I'll be laughed at for having only played 250
A lot of people that
hours.
don't play, that might watch the channel that play the occasional COD, they'll be like, only 250 hours?
Yeah.
I've got like 700 hours on Overwatch.
Yeah, of course he does. No, 0 hours on anything else. I never had to spend a dime on Warframe. I paid $100 and bought some credits just because they were on special, and I kind of wanted to give some money to DE. But it is the most fair free-to-play economy I've ever seen in a game.
I think it's a really good moment now to really talk about, of course, its competitor, Destiny 2. Now, the biggest thing, firstly, is like Destiny 2 and Bungie have like 750 or like 1,000 people on their staff. Now, Warframe has like 250. Now, we see that Warframe's free-to-play model, right, is so much more ambitious in terms of what they're trying to do and the updates that they're giving us. When I see Warframe's updates, or when I see Warframe's DLC, or these TennoCon presentations, it's so ambitious. It gives you such a great snapshot about how much they really want to be adding to these worlds compared to Destiny 2.
I think the big problem with Destiny 2 is that they're kind of still working on adding in their original content from Destiny 1. And it's almost become a meme at this point, but it's worth mentioning. Whereas Warframe is so ambitious in the way it adds, you know, fundamentally new gameplay mechanics.
New enemies. Like, the big problem with Destiny is like there's no new enemies all the time. But like there's so many things. Let's just quickly run through them because I really want to make sure that, like, you know, we don't want to spend too much time on the whole Destiny thing. But really, the PvP side was severely damaged by just the way that the direction they took. I mean, the Eververse...
The 4v6 stuff,
Yeah, the Eververse itself completely destroyed, you know, the way in which you play Destiny 2 compared to Destiny 1. It's just, it was so pay to win. It was so grindy. It was so hard to really get to that light level, you know, without having to pay a huge amount of money. And not to mention the Forsaken, the DLC, the annual pass, the stuff that they just pile on and on and on. They make it in such a way that you can't really enjoy Destiny without paying for everything, especially if you have friends that also play Destiny. They lock you out of that and you don't also pay just as much. So these are just some of the things that I find that are just, they're anti-consumer compared to Warframe, where they are so giving in what they give, and they're so about, you know, let's give you a great experience, and there's an option to pay, but you can also have a great experience without having to pay a huge amount to enjoy what we give you in Warframe.
Yeah, I think this is a really important point to hammer in on, is that the way in which Destiny 2 approaches content updating completely fragments the player base if you don't want to buy that content. So the way that Destiny 2 have done this is that they've got a two-pronged approach to paid DLC. You've got the Forsaken DLC, which is $40 US. Now that's your story update. That's going to be your new missions, your new, you know, voice-acted story campaign, and some other bits and bobs. You've then got your annual pass, which is a basically paid endgame content. So the endgame content that you'd expect to get in any kind of persistent online shooter, they're asking you to pay for. Now, I mean, you can sort of split hairs and say, well, you know, World of Warcraft makes you pay a subscription fee as well. But, I mean...
It's a different thing entirely now.
This is a different thing
entirely.
It's a different
landscape.
You know?
It's a different landscape too. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, you either it's really quite underhanded in how it's doing it, and I mean, this is $70 US in total to keep playing Destiny 2 in its most updated state. But the game is $60.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing here is a lot of people also always just kind of put the blame on Bungie, but I really, really do believe that Activision had a huge part in this. They're very aggressive with how many games they want to bring out in the next 10 years. And we're only at Destiny 2. They want Destiny 3, 4, and God knows how many more. And not to mention, you know, I think that they would be very much in the position of saying, let's make sure this is monetized as best as possible, so we, Activision, can make our shareholders happy. So when everyone's when people are always like, oh, Bungie's the evil guy, I think secretly Activision is just as evil.
Here's my little secret.
Destiny 2.
Murderer! Tell them the truth. I did it so they can hear you. I killed.
Destiny 2.
But apart from all this, I mean, the real question is, what are the lessons learned? Like, I think that the facts and figures are what we need to look at, and the facts and figures don't lie, people. And I personally think that this whole journey shows us that you can be pro-consumer and still make a lot of money and still build a great audience. In terms of what Warframe is doing compared to what Destiny's doing.
Yeah, I think what we should really be celebrating here is Warframe's success, and I suppose not so much Destiny's downfall. I mean, Warframe is an ongoing example of how, you know, keeping consumer centricity at the core of your business practice, your business model, your game design, and your day-to-day doings as a company really does find you onto a path of success.
I agree.
I mean, again, you know, you'd look at Warframe 4 or 5 years ago, and then you look at it now, and it's just a different game in every single way. And it's because they focused on their player base, they gave them what they want, they...
Vostir.
Glad you made it back. Hey.
Hi, this is Jasmine. I think you tried calling me twice. Yeah, so it's probably my old address. It's 10275 Old St. Augustine Road. And then apartment 808, Jacksonville, Florida, 32257. Yes. Yes, it's 163. Okay, and I have a question while you're too. The KM10 cordless, do you guys have that there? Okay. Hey, thank you so much. Appreciate it. You too. You wanna go to the mall with me?
Mm-hmm.
Because I have a lot of homework to do, which is gonna do later, but I wanna go to the mall first. So I'm gonna go shower and stuff and get ready.
Okay.
I think I'm gonna wash my hair.
Time is. Oh, today's Friday, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Mind if I just work out first, or
Yeah, you can do whatever you want. When are you gonna go?
probably like pretty soon?
Well, if you're gonna go pretty soon, that's fine. I just wanna go to the mall by like, what time is it? By like 1.
1?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that'll work.
Where are my glasses? I can't see. I actually wanted to work out too, but I want to go to the mall first.
When do you want to work out?
I wanted to work out today.
What time?
But I can go by myself. If you're going earlier, I want to go later, so.
Yeah, I'll go later with you.
I wanted to go to the mall, then I want to come here, do some homework, and then work out.
Okay. What? freaking whatever things keep killing me. Yeah, the path of building DPS is what, 4 million? Okay, yeah, I can get it. This is done. Oh. That's a problem. Alright, stream's over.